Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about the idea of survival of the fittest. This ideology came about from a person named Herbert Spencer in 1854. To him, it was a way to explain natural or biological selection. In another term, functional adaptation in a biological sense. Now, that ideology further on fueled Charles Darwin's beliefs of natural selection, which then fueled his cousin, Francis Galton, the father of eugenics. Now, the interesting thing about Francis Galton was that, of course, his idea came from Charles Darwin and, of course, Herbert Spencer. But what I want to say is that he was finest, and his ideology was co-opted by the elite at the time to legitimize their position in society and what they have done to be where they are in society. Now, if you check history, the way most people, robber barons, warlords, and so on and so forth, which became kings and so on, got their power was through wealth extraction, through wars, through domination and control. Now, any psychologist will tell you that it takes a great deal of narcissism to engage into those actions to build wealth. In point of fact, narcissists often use those methodology to get to a position they want to get into. So they're on top, and then they use domination and control to extract wealth. Okay, that's how they proceed. That's how they do everything. So if you can call it, if you want to use a triangular model, there on top, there is on one side you have domination and control, and you have wealth extraction. If you take that triangular model in a different way, you have on top, from a narcissistic point, you have on top the narcissist or the elite or the wealth extractor, and then on the left of the triangle you have the flying monkeys. But there are two types of flying monkeys. Yes, the narcissists always use two types of flying monkeys. There is the flying monkeys that act as the ambassador, the managerial class, right? And then you have the follower flying monkeys, those who will just take whatever the main mouthpiece of the narcissist want to share, want to create, want to make as reality, and find other people who follow them. That's how they built their influence. And then, of course, you have the victim on one side, on the right side of the triangular system of the narcissist. Narcissist on top. On one side, you have the two categories. Actually, there are three, but let's focus on the two categories of the flying monkeys, and then you have the victim on another side. That's what makes it so hard for the victim, because the flying monkeys become a mouthpiece, a force to basically suppress anything that the victim will have to say. So Francis Galton was financed, of course, to sell on the idea of the elite, which was that any success in society is because of biological selection. Of course, he didn't look into the idea that most of the time people succeed because of environmental suppressors and human-made suppressors, right? And of course, there is also the idea of access, right? So all these things come into play into this natural selection ideology, which of course later on fueled the ideology of whiteness and racial superiority and so on and so forth that the Nazis bought into. But of course, like everything in society, anything good can also be co-opted into something negative. So just like the swastika, which is actually a South Indian or an Eastern symbol of the sun, was turned upside down to signify a black sun, to signify something negative, right? So anything good can be co-opted. Even spiritual information can be co-opted into something negative, which I've learned the hard way. So what I'm trying to say here is the idea of survival of the fittest, as people believe it to be, is actually not about survival of the fittest. Francis Galton coined it as he was financed to sell it as the survival of what must be done to protect the elite at the time. So it wasn't about survival of the fittest as whoever is strong or powerful. It is about the protection of the elite and what must be done to protect the elite to maintain the status in society. So what am I trying to say here? Racism is for the peasants. It's a system created for the peasants to maintain the wealth extraction system of those who want to extract those wealth with impunity and with no resistance. So that is all what it is. It is basically what it's all about. Wealth extraction, but before how you can do that wealth extraction with impunity, you have to create a system of dominance and control. And that's what those eugenic systems were built to do. Structurally, that's what they were built to do. But for the peasants, they were made to believe in the ideology of racial superiority as like the magician's trick. The magician trick, there's something going on behind the scene, but you are being sold something to divert your attention so that you don't know exactly what is really going on. That's all it is. It's a sleight of hand. So the way you make people buy into it is by creating a system of reward systems to maintain or ground that ideology. That's why it's so hard to get rid of. Because when you build an ideology, but you don't create anything tangible to reward that ideology to persist, it doesn't stay grounded or it doesn't last. But when you create system to ground that ideology and make people buy into it, then it becomes more real and it becomes more pervasive in society. So survival of the fittest is not about survival of the fittest. It's just a ploy for wealth extraction. You see around the world how many populations, many places around the world that are in the racial hierarchy, in the lower end of the racial hierarchy, experience the most amount of wealth extraction, while those people are also in the racial system defined as lower. It is a game. It is a narcissistic game for wealth extraction, but unfortunately, people are trained to believe that it is real. And as long as people believe that is real, that wealth extraction will keep going all the way to the top. That's all it is. So Francis Galton was trained to sell society on that belief system, which later on was adopted by the Nazis, and of course, through the eugenic system, was expanded and built into what we call today racism or whiteness. But it is just, again, a ploy for wealth extraction. I'm sure you've watched a movie where some people, for some reason or another, hijacked a place or have many people as hostages, and then they claim that it's for a cause, but toward the end, everybody found out that it is not about the cause; it's just about money, right? So it is basically the same thing. Wealth extraction is sold to many people with a diversion tactic as something else, so that wealth extraction can keep going. That's all it is about. So when you are talking about racism, whiteness, and all this kind of stuff, what I'd like you to gain or extract from this video is that please always keep in mind that is a diversion tactic. You are being sold, emotionally sold something, so that something else can keep going with impunity. You'll find that in history. So, all over history, every time there is a great deal of suppression of any population, there is always a great deal of wealth extraction. So, this is a perspective I want to share with you on this idea of survival of the fittest as it relates to racial superiority and inferiority and all this kind of stuff, and the ploy behind it as to the reason why we deal with so many issues in society. Now, my channel is a spiritual channel, so I am sharing this as a conversation to dive into other aspect of this issue, which has to do with spiritual identity. This aspect of it, spiritual identity, ties into narcissism and the ploys of narcissism to maintain power and control for wealth extraction. And of course, wealth extraction is not just money-based. Wealth extraction can be energetic, can be spiritual. There are many different, can be emotional. Many people know of this, experience this as energy vampirism. So wealth extraction can take many forms. As a point of fact, many energy vampires use the same tactic, right, to drain you. So I'm gonna stop here, and in the next video in these conversations, we'll talk more about spiritual identity. Spiritual identity being something that the spiritual master has tried to teach in the world. We call that spiritual master Yeshua, and other spiritual masters have tried to teach that as well, the subject of spiritual identity, and we'll dive deeper into that subject. And I want to share that information because I've learned a great deal from it, from my interaction with the divine and from spiritual warfare. So I want to share it with you so you can have a different perspective on your spiritual experience here as a physical being on earth. So thanks so much for watching this video, and until next time, have a good day and be blessed. Bye-bye.